If you spent time in a British kitchen garden or allotment in the 1960s and 1970s, you will probably remember practices that nobody questioned at the time. Bonfires at the bottom of the garden, chemicals kept in unlabeled tins in the potting shed, a hose pipe run down to the stream for irrigation. These were ordinary things that ordinary British families did, as a matter of course, handed down from one generation to the next. What most people do not realize is that a significant number of those practices are now restricted by law, banned under environmental legislation, or treated as criminal offenses. Today, we are counting down 20 traditional British gardening methods your grandparents used without a second thought that have since been made illegal or heavily restricted. Some of these will genuinely surprise you. Number 20. Garden bonfires. There's almost no tradition more deeply British than burning the autumn clearance at the bottom of the garden. Your grandfather stacked dead prunings, old canes, and spent plants into a heap and put a match to it on a still October morning, and the smoke drifting over the fence was simply part of the season. Garden bonfires are not uniformly illegal in England and Wales today, but the Clean Air Act 1993 makes it an offence to cause a nuisance or produce dark, toxic smoke, and many local councils now have bylaws restricting when and how you can burn. In Scotland, enforcement is stricter still. What was a standard autumn ritual for a century is now something that can result in a visit from the environmental health officer. Number 19. Nicotine spray. Your grandmother almost certainly made this herself. You soaked old cigarette ends in warm water overnight, strained the liquid into a hand sprayer, and applied it to roses suffering from greenfly. It worked well and cost nothing. In 2009, the European Union banned nicotine-based pesticides for amateur use, and that ban carried into UK law. Tobacco water used as a garden spray is classified as an unregistered pesticide, and using an unregistered pesticide in a way that may harm the environment is an offense under the Food and Environment Protection Act, 1985. Number 18. Digging up wildflowers from roadsides, walking home from the countryside with a clump of cowslips or wild primroses wrapped in newspaper was entirely normal behavior for your grandparents' generation. The Wildlife and Countryside Act, 1981, changed all of that. It is now illegal to uproot any wild plant from land without the landowner's permission, and for around 150 specifically listed species, including bluebells, it is an offense to pick, uproot, or trade them anywhere in Britain. What your grandfather did as a small pleasure is now a criminal matter. Number 17. Sodium chlorate weed killer. Before glyphosate became the standard, sodium chlorate was what you reached for on a persistent weed problem, particularly on gravel drives and hard standing areas. It was cheap, effective, and available in every hardware shop. In 2009, sodium chlorate was withdrawn from amateur sale across the EU and UK under the Biocidal Products Directive due to its persistence in groundwater and its significant fire risk when dried on clothing or organic material. Stocks already sitting in garden sheds quietly became illegal to use, and many people did not find out for several years. Number 16. Taking cuttings from plants on public or council land, a fine rose trained against a park wall, an interesting clematis on a public fence, a particularly good shrub in a council planning scheme. Taking a cutting from any plant on land you do not own is a matter of property law, and propagating from varieties protected under the Plant Varieties Act 1997. Without a license is a civil offense. Your grandfather simply called it sharing. The law has a different name for it. If you are enjoying the list so far, now is a great time to hit the like button and subscribe so you catch the rest of this video and future ones like it. Number 15. Spreading raw manure near watercourses or on frozen ground. A good dressing of farmyard manure was the foundation of any productive British kitchen garden. You got it from a local farm in autumn, barrowed it onto the beds, and let the frost break it down. Current regulations under the Water Framework Directive and the nitrates regulations make spreading raw manure within a set distance of a watercourse, on frozen ground, or on waterlogged soil a serious offense that attracts significant fines from the Environment Agency. Number 14. Growing Japanese knotweed and allowing it to spread. Japanese knotweed was introduced to Britain in the Victorian era and was sold at one point as an ornamental and even as a food crop. Some families grew it as a windbreak. Under the Wildlife and Countryside Act 1981 and the Infrastructure Act 2015, allowing knotweed to spread from your land onto neighboring land is a civil liability matter that can result in court action, and disposing of knotweed material incorrectly is a criminal offense. Knotweed soil is classified as controlled waste. A plant your great-grandmother may have deliberately planted is now one of the most legally complicated things you can have in a British garden. Number 13. Using copper sulfate as a fungicide. Bluestone, as gardeners called it, was a British horticultural staple for well over a century. Mixed with slaked lime, it became Bordeaux mixture, used on potato crops against blight and on fruit trees, roses, and vines. Copper sulfate is a heavy metal compound that accumulates in soil and is highly toxic to earthworms and aquatic life. Amateur use of copper-based fungicides has been severely restricted under UK and EU regulations, and the heavy repeated applications your grandfather made routinely to his potato bed would now breach environmental regulations in most circumstances. Number 12. Shooting pigeons or rabbits without understanding the current licensing framework. Your grandfather kept a shotgun or air rifle and used it to protect his kitchen garden as a matter of routine. Following a significant revision of the general licenses by Natural England in 2019, the legal framework around pest control changed considerably. The rules governing which species can be controlled, by whom, and under what specific justification became far more detailed. Simply shooting pigeons because they were eating your cabbages without documenting that you had considered non-lethal alternatives became legally questionable in a way it had never previously been. Number 11. Releasing pond plants into the wild. Water gardening has been popular in Britain for over a century, and clearing a pond in autumn by throwing excess plants into a nearby ditch or stream was entirely normal. Species including azalea, parrot's feather, floating pennywort, and water primrose are now listed as invasive non-native species under Schedule 9 of the Wildlife and Countryside Act, and releasing them into the wild is a criminal offense. Your grandparents were simply tidying their ponds. Number 10. Using calomel, a mercury-based fungicide. Mercurous chloride, sold as calomel, was used in British horticulture from the Victorian era into the 1970s and 1980s as a clubroot treatment for brassicas and as a turf fungicide. Mercury compounds are now completely prohibited in garden use. They persist in soil indefinitely, accumulate in the food chain, and are highly toxic to human health and wildlife. What was sold openly in garden centers 40 years ago is today classified as a hazardous substance under multiple pieces of legislation. Number 9. Burning treated or painted timber. Old fence posts, painted shed boards, creosoted railway sleepers, and pressure-treated wood all went onto the bonfire. Burning treated wood releases dioxins, heavy metals including arsenic and chromium, and in the case of creosote-treated material, polycyclic aromatic hydrocarbons. Under the Environmental Protection Act 1990 and the Clean Air Act 1993, burning materials that produce toxic fumes is an offense. Treated timber is classified as hazardous waste and must be disposed of through a licensed contractor. Number 8. Saving and selling seeds from protected plant varieties. Seed saving is among the oldest traditions in British horticulture. You saved from your best plants, dried and stored through winter, and swapped freely with neighbors and fellow allotment holders. Commercially bred F1 hybrid varieties and varieties registered under plant breeders' rights are now protected under the Plant Varieties Act 1997, and selling or exchanging seed from those varieties without a license is an offense. What your grandparents took for granted has become legally complicated in ways they would find very hard to understand. Number 7. Using 2,4,5-T herbicide. Alongside sodium chlorate, 2,4,5-T was a widely used garden and agricultural herbicide in Britain into the 1980s, particularly effective on woody growth and scrub. It was also one of the 2 components of Agent Orange. Production was found to result in dioxin contamination as a byproduct, and it was progressively withdrawn and banned across Europe. If tins of old garden chemicals are still sitting in a shed on inherited property, they constitute a regulated hazardous waste problem, not something to be used or poured away. Number 6. Planting or spreading Himalayan balsam or giant hogweed. Both plants were once deliberately grown in British gardens. Giant hogweed arrived as a Victorian ornamental, and Himalayan balsam, with its pretty pink flowers, was popular in cottage gardens. Both are now listed under Schedule 9 of the Wildlife and Countryside Act, 1981. Deliberately planting either or taking any action that causes them to spread beyond your own boundary is a criminal offense. Giant hogweed causes serious photosensitive burns and is a genuine public safety hazard. Number 5. Using gray water for irrigation without proper safeguards. Your grandmother tipped her washing up bowl onto the flower beds without hesitation. Using household gray water for irrigation is not straightforwardly illegal, but connecting gray water to any kind of irrigation system without proper treatment puts you in regulated territory under building regulations and water company bylaws. Water companies have authority to inspect and require disconnection of any system considered a contamination risk to the main supply, and ignoring such a notice puts you in breach of water supply regulations. Number 4. Taking water from a stream or spring without an abstraction license. If your grandfather had a stream at the bottom of his market garden, he ran a pipe into it for irrigation and thought nothing of it. The Water Resources Act, 1991, requires an abstraction license for taking more than 20 cubic meters of water per day from any surface water or groundwater source, and regulatory scrutiny below that threshold has increased significantly in recent years. The irrigation pipe your grandfather ran into the stream at the field bottom is now a potentially unlicensed abstraction under current law. Number 3. Disturbing asbestos cement in old garden structures. Many British gardens contain asbestos cement in old cold frames, shed roofing, and water storage tanks because it was a common building material for decades. Your grandfather thought nothing of cutting or breaking down these structures during a clearance. Asbestos is now regulated under the Control of Asbestos Regulations 2012. Cutting, breaking, or disposing of asbestos-containing material through ordinary waste channels is an offense. The structures can remain in place, but the moment you work on them, you are operating in tightly regulated territory. Number 2. Dumping garden waste in hedgerows or field margins. The old way was to barrow excess material to the field edge and tip it under the hedge. Garden waste, including grass clippings, soil, and prunings, was routinely left on verges and in lanes across rural Britain. Fly-tipping garden waste is now an offense under the Environmental Protection Act 1990 and can attract fixed penalty notices or prosecution for householders. The hedgerow that served as a convenient tip for 60 years is now legally protected land. Number 1. Using lead arsenate or arsenical compounds as pest control. Lead arsenate was used in British orchards and kitchen gardens from the late Victorian era into the 1940s and in some cases into the 1950s. It controlled codling moth in apple orchards, was applied against caterpillars, and was used on potato foliage. Arsenic compounds accumulate in soil over decades and are highly carcinogenic. They were progressively withdrawn from British agriculture through the post-war period, but their legacy is still measurable in the soil of some old orchard sites today. Surveys of historic growing land in Britain have found arsenic concentrations significantly above safe limits many decades after the last application. Your great-grandfather had no way of knowing this when he was caring for his trees. If you garden on land that was previously an old orchard or market garden, it is worth knowing that the soil itself may carry that history. Thank you very much for watching this far through the list. If you found any of this genuinely surprising, please do leave a comment below telling us which one caught you off guard, or whether your own grandparents used any of these old methods. We read every comment. And if you enjoyed the video, hitting subscribe and giving it a like takes just a moment and helps the channel keep making content like this. We will see you in the next one.